Tonight, Jeffrey Tucker breaks down the timeline of events that saw the US throw out standard pandemic protocols and instead adopt radical lockdown policies inspired by the Chinese Communist Party. He also breaks down the root causes of inflation in America and how COVID policies created, in effect, a caste system.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek.
Jeffrey Tucker, so good to have you back on American Thought Leaders.
Of course, it's great to be here.
Well, I want to start off with something, a statement from Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Dr. Fauci, U.S. District Judge Catherine Kimball Mizell tossed out the mask mandate. As you know, do you personally agree or disagree with her interpretation of public health law?
Well, I clearly disagree. I mean, those types of things should be decided as a public health issue by the public health organizations, in this case, the CDC.
Dr. Fauci basically said, in response to a Florida judge basically striking down the mask mandates, he said it was a CDC decision and that the courts were in no place to do that. And you have some thoughts on this. And frankly, it's a bigger question, isn't it?
It's a big question. I mean, are courts allowed to restrain government? Are governments subject to law? And keep in mind, we're not talking about elected politicians here or legislatures. We're talking about the administrative state appointed to these offices. Fauci has served, I don't know what, 4, 5, 6 presidents, I don't know. So now here you have, and he works for the NIH, but I guess technically he has some oversight to the CDC, is announcing that there should be no restraints on the administrative power of deep state bureaucracies at all. Not legislatures, and certainly not courts. Now, to me, this shows what kind of bubble they live in, right? So here you have a judge that says, look, this mandate, this transportation mandate that you passed, it's just not working for us because you cited a 1944 Public Health Services Act, which is designed to prevent the importation of infectious disease in one form or another. It doesn't seem to allow you to pick clothing choices on the airplanes for Americans. This is not what we're doing. And the administration even cited some passage in that law having to do with sanitation. And the judge said, this is crazy. This is not your purview. It's not. People are not breaking the law when they didn't want to comply. The administrative state was breaking the law by making people comply. So that was, really an interesting thing and a great moment of hope for Americans because, wow, that's the way the system's supposed to work. A little late, but still, the courts, finally moved against the overreach of a bureaucracy. Now, what's striking to me is this was not a gaffe, as they say, like a mistaken statement. This is what they decided to say because it really does reflect their deeper belief. But I think we need to think what that deeper belief is. It really represents a fundamental challenge to the whole of modernity itself, which has been, like a key tenet of modern life. And the thing that gave birth to the idea of human freedom itself is that government should be restrained and we should have rules in place that say to the king, you can do this, but you can't do that. You can go back to the Magna Carta, which is a pretty important document in history. And the first time, in the West in any case, where there were really strict rules on what government can and cannot do. So what Fauci says in the statement that he makes, and again echoed by everybody else in the administration, is that that's not for us. We need unmitigated power to do whatever we want, so long as our scientists say that's consistent with public health. But it's not limited to public health. I mean, if that's true for public health, why isn't it also true for labor? Why can't the Department of Labor then just pass any law? This would unleash on the world a truly, I would say, like pre-modern form of government. And the fact that Fauci could say this with such confidence and no awareness at all of how radically opposed this is to any standard of what government's supposed to be or human freedom is should alarm us. I think it's alarming.
I think what you're saying is really interesting because we're seeing this kind of trend in, let's say, many areas. You know, I can't help but think about this whole Twitter saga, right, with Elon Musk launching this hostile takeover of Twitter. The argument back is, it's almost like this: free speech actually undermines democracy. I think I've seen that variants of that.
They have said,
back.
Yeah, and it's startling to, Jan, we shouldn't be surprised by now, but actually we should be surprised. I mean, we've lived through 2 years of this kind of despotic rule. Suddenly all of our social media platforms were taken over by basically the CDC and the World Health Organization to decide what it is we can and cannot say. And it's not really even about the truth or falsehood of what you're saying, right? I mean, it's only what the administrative state on that day, that hour, says you can say. And they can change, you know, the next day, the next week, as we've seen with the CDC constantly changing, and Fauci, for that matter, changing. Well, wait a minute, last week you said that, well, of course the science changed. The science? But I've got science here, don't show me your piece of paper. You know, so it's really starting to feel like a dystopian movie in some ways. The lockdowns of 2 years ago now were really a fundamental challenge to everything as Americans. Okay, now the scientists are in charge of everything, whether your church can stay open, whether you can celebrate Easter, whether your small business can stay open, whether you can go grab a beer at the bar, whether your kids can play at a playground, how many people you can have in your home, whether and to what extent you can actually cross the state line without being forced into a quarantine, and you're going to be tracked by an app, by the way, and all of this happened to us all at once. Nobody voted on it. We've got a network in operation here. They've tasted power, and they've seen what's possible. They don't want to let it go. They want it to last and last and last.
Well, and it's also very interesting that of all the things that we're talking about is this mask, it's these transportation mask mandates.
I know.
Okay.
And, you know, but so here's the thing, Jan. Why the mask? You know, why the mask? Now, it's true that the mask itself has a long history of its association with subjection and servitude. I mean, there's a long association with those two things, you know, covering the mouth, you know, silencing the speech, making breath impossible. So all of that is true about masks, but they become such a flashpoint because they represent a very sort of highly personalized imposition of something that's a much broader problem, which was, you know, the rule of the administration, with the arbitrary dictates, the impositions, the mandates, you know, the forced shots on penalty of losing your jobs, the travel restrictions, the shutdowns. I mean, this sudden weird way in which, in the land of the free and home of the brave, we were ruled by these wild arbitrary dictates for the better part of 2 years, and the evidence for this is still all around us. I mean, the plexiglass is still in all the businesses, maybe not in Florida, but it's certainly in the Northeast. It's still everywhere. The stickers, you know, the limits on the elevators. I mean, all these weirdly, strangely unscientific things that are born of panic on one hand, but also, I would say, despotic aspiration on the other.